Morning or good afternoon, everyone. This is Cindy McDonald, and this is another one of my series of interviews with subject matter experts throughout the country talking about special issues in college counseling. And today I have with me a very special guest, Lorraine Serra. She has her own college counseling company that has a specialization, and her company is Portfolio College. And Lorraine, I've known for many years. Thank you for being with us today, Lorraine. Can you tell my class a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you came to do what you're doing right now?
Great. Well, first, thank you, Cindy. I'm honored to be able to be here and talk to you today. So I came to college counseling, and my focus on working with creative students from a background that I had in design and in teaching and in business. So I had a graphic design business for about 25 years, and I also taught design, and I gave workshops at various places, including 10 years that I taught at FIT in New York. So I didn't know it at the time, but those things were very good preparation for what I do now. So then back in about 2008, I decided that I wanted to step away from being a designer and do something different. I wanted to use the skill sets that I already had. So I thought about it, and I decided that I wanted to help students prepare their portfolios for art schools. And a big reason for me was that when I was a student, I really did not ever have that kind of assistance. And I also knew that I loved, from teaching, I loved talking to kids that age, teenagers and up. And I also knew after teaching that I preferred working one-on-one with students rather than lecturing to a whole class. So I researched the field a little bit, and one of the things I found out was that no one else was focusing on the arts at that time. So that was a big plus for me. But I had nobody to talk to, but it was, when I found that out, it was encouraging for me. So from that, I became more interested in the whole college counseling process. And I just, at one point, I was looking around, and I just happened to find the UCLA program online. And I think I found out about it on a Saturday, and the classes were starting on Monday. And so I made up my mind, and I signed up, and I started it. And it was probably, I think, the best academic experience I ever had.
Oh.
It took me about 1.5 years to finish because I took one class at a time. But it really helped me to focus on what I wanted to do. It gave me a lot more information about college counseling than I had in my little art world. And it gave me the tools to help me to get there. So that was about 8 years ago. And I still focus on art and design students, but I've expanded to work with both U.S. and international students. I do almost 100% of my work by Skype. I work with undergraduate students and graduate students. And I also work in related areas like architecture, arts management, I see a lot lately, urban planning, art history. So visual arts and related arts. And I love it. I'm thrilled that I'm doing this kind of work.
So when they contact you, first of all, how do they find out about you? If you're doing this all virtually and you're doing this through Skype, how do they find out about you?
Well, fortunately, some students have been able to find me through my website.
Mm-hmm.
I have gotten referrals from other counselors. So I consult with other counselors sometimes. I have referrals from parents to other parents, siblings. I have worked as a consultant for a couple of agencies who let me know if they have a student that I might be interested in working with or who has a particular focus on the arts. So a variety of ways. I find students, and they find me in a variety of ways.
And I think that speaks to our industry really well, is that there's no one way, but word of mouth referrals is probably our biggest source. That having a website and building that network, that's where doing some networking and letting people know that you're there and what your focus is really important. So when a student comes into our offices and says, I want to study, visual arts in a college, what questions should a counselor ask them?
Well, that's a good question. So really, it's a similar process to with any student. So I want them to think about who they are and what they like to do and what they want to do in the future. First thing I do is let them talk about themselves, and I listen to them and I take notes. And I think that's been key in really focusing on what they need. So, and most of them have no trouble talking about themselves. But if they do, the first questions I ask them help me to determine what their commitment to art is. And I want to find out what they know about art. So I ask them, have they created any artwork? What kind of artwork? Would they share some of it with me? And we do that via Dropbox or email. Mm-hmm. Do they create art independently, or are they taking classes, or are they going to summer programs? Do they have a major in mind? Do they have a career in mind? Do we need to talk about that first? Very important, how do they manage time? And I asked them a few questions sort of related to that to get a sense of that. Also important, I asked them if their families are supportive of their idea of studying art, because it makes the process so much easier when families are on board and they're okay with that, and they're not really being held back by any myths about becoming an artist. I also asked them about their academics, their test scores. These are equally important to art students. So from all of that, from that conversation and those questions, I start to get an idea of what they need and how I can help that particular student. And then I let them ask questions, and they usually have, questions about things that people have told them, or they heard about this, or they heard about that, or this school or that school. So based on all of that, that conversation and my notes, we just sit down and make a plan. So it's a little different for each student.
Mm-hmm. What do you tell parents, though? You bring up the topic of, is their family supportive? And that's often one of the biggest questions parents have, is what is my child going to do with a degree in, art or graphic design or something like that? So what do you tell parents to help them to see the value and be supportive?
Excuse me 1 second. There we go, sorry. Well, I bombard them with data. I send them articles, professional scholarly articles. I talk to them about areas of art, like some digital arts, industrial design, architecture, where there are very clear career paths and very good opportunities for graduates, even from just with an undergraduate degree. So I pull out a lot of that data and talk to them about different majors. I try to move them away from this idea that, you're going to come out with a useless degree. There have been a lot of studies that suggest that creative thinkers, not just artists, but creative thinkers in all fields are highly valuable candidates for jobs. Students who can, people who can think critically, work in teams, work independently, manage their times, think outside the box, take risks. All of these things are characteristics of an art student, of a good art student. And those things are very valuable to employers. So I try to use information to help them understand that it's not such a bad thing.
Exactly. And I think that, I mean, you know, giving them that kind of information and having them look at it and review it can go quite a long ways to alleviating some of those concerns, especially, I imagine, with some of your international students or Chinese students.
Right. Especially with that group, they're really, a lot of them are not aware of all of the possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
All of the interdisciplinary majors that are available. A lot of them, in the same way that they are only aware of, and I don't mean to generalize at all, but you know, top 10, top 20, top 30 schools. They're not aware of the other thousands of schools that we have in the US. They're not aware that there are well over 100 art-related majors, mm-hmm. many of which are in very high demand, and many of which combine sciences, social sciences, maths, you know, and other, you know, and other disciplines. So again, I try to educate them a little bit as well about all of the options that are out there.
That sounds like good advice, and it sounds like something that's very helps with the whole process and gets it off on the right foot. So when you're working with students, what's the difference between an art or other type of conservatory and a program within a college itself? So going to an art school per se versus an art program within a comprehensive university.
Okay. So an art school offers only programs that are directly related to art or design, obviously. So all of the students there are there to study art, design. All of the financial resources of the college go to arts programs and arts programming and resources. All of the financial aid goes to art students. So those are some key differences. Also, art schools are generally in cities or urban areas. Mm-hmm. They're usually smaller, although like SCAD has almost 12,000 students, so that's very large. Parsons has about 6,000. So they're typically about the size of a lot of liberal arts colleges. Class sizes are usually smaller because they're studio classes a lot of the times. Art schools offer different degrees usually. They offer BFA, most common for undergrads, MFA for grad students. And so at liberal arts colleges, most of the degrees, and this is general, you will find exceptions to all of these generalizations, but at liberal arts colleges, you usually find Bachelor of Arts programs that have majors for art. And what's good about that is that a student can double major, so they can major in art and something else if they are not sure, or if they already know that they don't want art as their career. Mm-hmm. That can be a good thing. They can also minor with a BA program. So a lot of it is about the actual composition of the degree. So that's art schools and liberal arts colleges. Universities have a variety of scenarios. So they can have an art department. They can have an art school in the university, like Temple University has Tyler School of Art. It's a kind of a standalone art college within the greater university. And in some ways, this is a great option for students because they have the opportunity to study for Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in the university. They have the resources of the entire university. They have a much more diverse student population.
Right.
However, at a university or a liberal arts college, sometimes the academic standards are higher, and the student will also have to meet, as well as the artistic standards, the academic standards of the university. in order to be admitted.
And also to graduate too, right?
Right. Oh, absolutely. Even in an art school, this is one misconception. Students think that if they go to art school, and parents too, that all they're going to study is art. And it's really, I try to explain, it's really about the degree program. Within your 128 credits, even in a Bachelor of Fine Arts program, about a third of those credits are liberal arts electives and required courses, no matter where you go.
So there's science at an art school is what you're saying.
Could be, yeah, could be. If they're very specific about what your required courses are, your core curriculum.
Now, what about for-profit art schools? I know there are a lot of art programs that are, the Art Institute of XYZ all over. So what are your recommendations, and how do our counselors recognize those and counsel in terms of those?
I would I would investigate the curriculum thoroughly, as I would anywhere. If a student is looking for financial aid, I would be very careful about for-profit schools and find out what type of aid they offer. They tend to be much more flexible, let's say, about admissions. I would also check graduation rates. I would really do my homework and just be a little bit cautious about them.
Yes, we have, I do case studies for our class as well, and we have a case study on that in terms of a student wants to go to an art school and finds out the average debt is like $100,000 in graduation. And a lot of the for-profit art schools fall into that category. So and that's where our role as counselors is so important, because our families aren't going to know the difference between the university program, a standalone nonprofit art school plus a for-profit art school. They just see them as art schools. So that's where our knowledge and expertise can be so instrumental for the families.
Definitely.
So what about portfolios? That's a big thing of what you do. What do you find with portfolios, Lorraine, and what kind of recommendations, or how do you guide students through that process?
Okay, so first thing is that art schools are not looking for students who are already professional artists. They're looking for students who can show evidence that they're committed to making art. They're looking to get a sense of a student's ability with different materials, different media, their ability to tell their stories visually. They're also looking at their willingness to take risks in their artwork and problem-solving ability. So they're not looking for perfect pictures, in other words. Students have to be able to draw, and this comes as a surprise to a lot of fashion design students or architecture students. Lots of schools have the schools have very specific requirements for portfolios, and many of them specify a number or a percentage of what's called observational drawing. So drawing from life in any, indoor, outdoor, landscape, anatomical, whatever. Student really needs to know how to draw. Student needs to present a variety of pieces in their portfolios. One thing that's very important that I work with students on is interpreting all of the requirements for each school's portfolio submission. Read the questions. Understand what they're asking for. If they're asking for 12 to 15 pieces, don't send them 8, don't send them 20. I work very carefully with students to make sure they have a balanced portfolio that shows them off to the best of their ability. They need to photograph their art in terms of preparation of their portfolio. They need to photograph it with good light, with a good camera, with a minimum of distractions. Sometimes they need help in submitting their work because it's submitted digitally almost in every school. What else? Don't be repetitive. I think of the student's portfolio as their visual resume.
Mm-hmm.
Shows who they are. Each piece shows something a little bit different about who they are, about what their skills are, about the topics that they're really interested in. Lots of times if they have concerns about social issues or personal issues, that comes out through their art. So I encourage them to let the colleges know who they are through their artwork.
And that's a really nice way to do it, because it does give them a pretty open slate, and it's not as restrictive as sometimes the regular admissions process. Now, are there schools that don't require, can you go to an art school without submitting a portfolio?
There are some, yes. Savannah College of Art and Design, for instance, does not require a portfolio, except if the student is interested in merit aid. So you won't be considered, for instance, for merit aid unless you submit a portfolio. Only the BFA programs require a portfolio in general.
Okay.
A BA program generally does not, because it's not considered a path to professional career in art. So generally speaking, and the same thing with graduate schools. If a program requires a portfolio, it generally doesn't require a GRE, and vice versa. I've been testing out that theory, and so far it's 100% true. Yeah, I have not found any that require both a portfolio and a GRE, but someone out there will let me know if there is one.
So do you find that your students will go one direction or another, or do they're only doing the portfolio art schools, or they're doing ones that don't require portfolios, or a mix? What ends up being the best balance for? Does it vary by student? What do you find?
It varies by student. I have a lot of students right now who are thinking about different majors, who want to apply to a group of schools that includes conservatory art schools and university programs. So it's really a mix, and I spend a good amount of time trying to help a student define that, and it's hard to know. So I encourage them to visit. I encourage them to do a summer program between junior and senior year, if that's possible. So yes, definitely a mix.
What age do students usually come to you and say, Lorraine, I want you to help me with my college selection and my portfolio? Are they usually early on, or is it?
Usually, they usually contact me when they're juniors. Early in their junior year, I think, gives a student a good amount of time. If it's at the end of their sophomore year in high school, I think that's fine too. If they wait until they're seniors, then it's really a crunch, especially if they have very little work that would be appropriate for a portfolio. Then it's a rush to the finish.
Right. That makes sense. So if my students want to reach you, how do they do that, Lorraine?
They can reach me at by email. It's Lorraine@portfoliocc.com. My cell is 203-947-9899. So that's great for texts.
Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your time today. I know everybody will really appreciate it. So.
Okay, thank you so much, Cindy. It was a pleasure speaking with you and seeing you again.
Thank you.